I am Jodi Reeb, and I am coming to you from Minneapolis and my studio here. I've been an artist for 30 years, and I'm so happy to be a part of the Silverbrush Educators Ambassadors. And I'm going to be showing you some mixed media paintings. I work with photography and encaustic paint, which is molten beeswax. And I'm going to show you how to use your photographs printed on tissue paper as collage. And I'm going to use natural bristle brushes to combine that wax and my tissue. Here is a semi-finished painting to show you what I'm going to show you. This is a combination of an image that I printed on tissue paper, and then I have painted wax underneath this layer of collage as well as on top. If you'll notice, there's lots of beautiful texture that you can get with the wax. And because you work with it molten, and as soon as it cools, it really loves to build up texture. But you can also work with it very smooth. So I'm going to show you those two techniques. I want to let you know a little bit about history of encaustic. It's really started with ancient Egyptians who were using it to make portraits of people that passed as tributes. And now we are using it in all sorts of contemporary applications. And you need to heat the wax between 160 to 220 degrees, so it's molten, and then it works just like regular paint. But you do need to fuse it, which is something I'm going to show you with just heating it, once you get the paint on the painting, and then you can carve into it, and you can create some transparent layers as well as some opaque layers. Here is what the paint looks like. This is a combination of beeswax, damar resin, which is a hardener, and pigment. So they're very light, fast colors, just like you would find in the other colors, whether it's acrylic or oil. And this paint is then melted on a griddle, which I'm going to show you how to do, and combined with the tissue paper. To start, I want to show you the brushes I will be using as part of my demonstration. So with encaustic or beeswax, that word is a Greek word which means to burn in. I get a question about that a lot. And the brushes you need to use, because of the heat source, is natural. So my favorite Silverbrush brushes are the line of Grand Prix. So I'm going to use two brushes focusing on Grand Prix, and these are hog bristle. This one's 4, and it's a filbert, and then this one is a round, and it is a 6. So I'm going to use those two out of the line of the Grand Prix. And then I'm going to use brights, which are also my favorite shape. This one is a 4 out of Silverstone, the Silverstone line, and then this one is a 10. So a little bit on the spectrum of small and large. And as well as a Hake style Atelier brush. This one is made of goat hair, and you can kind of see it's a little bit more light and fluffy. And this brush is really good for long, broad strokes when you want to cover a large area with paint. The goat hair really insulates the heat so that you can get a lot of coverage with that. And then the hog bristle tends to be more of a detail brush. And I especially like the brights because it's almost like two brushes in one, where you can paint on the flat side as well as turning it to the side and just getting more of a detail brush. And last but not least, my new favoriteest tool from Silverbrush is the palette knife. They are gorgeously constructed, very shiny, beautiful stainless steel metal. And this is one of my favorite tools. This is the 6 in the line of palette knives that are brand new from Silverbrush. And these, I use these a lot when I'm embedding the tissue paper into the wax, kind of using the wax as glue to combine that. And then I'm able to press this down, and it really has a nice rounded edge, so I'm able to really press the tissue into the wax without any damage. And this really allows me to also carve texture later into the wax too. Stay tuned until the end of the video, where there will be a discount code for all the brushes and the palette knife that I'm working with in this video today. And this is really a good starter set if you are working with encaustic. It's got many shapes and different coverages, as well as the natural bristles, which are a good fit for the encaustic painting. One last piece, I will be making my painting today on encaustic board, which is from Ampersand Art. When you work with wax, it's recommended that you work on a rigid surface. And this is already primed with encaustic gesso, so it's very absorbent. And it's also very heat resistant, so you can take that heat when we are heating up the paint once we apply it to the panel. So natural bristle brushes, encaustic paint, and nice rigid surface for painting. So to get started, I have an image here that I have printed on tissue paper, and I apply a backer sheet to this so it can go through the printer. And if you follow any of my videos on YouTube under Jodi Reeb, you can see a little bit more in depth on how to print a little bit more delicate papers through your printers. I'm using an inkjet, so it's very soft on the tissue, and it's a pigment-based printer, so my colors are light bath. In this video, you will learn how to embed collage into your encaustic paintings, creating a very smooth surface to start, and then a textured surface after we apply the tissue. So let's get started. For our first layer, we are going to use encaustic medium, and this is really the base paint anytime you start an encaustic painting. And what this consists of is beeswax, damar resin, which is a tree sap, which elevates the melting temperature, and the combination of those two are what really create a solid art material. So when beeswax is combined with damar resin, it is called encaustic medium. And here I have it from R&S Handmade Paints, and it's in pellet form, so I can melt this easily on my heated griddle, which I'll show you in a moment, or I can put into tins to mix paints. To start my encaustic painting, I will use the Hake style brush, which this one I have is 2 inches. It also comes in larger, 4 inches as well. And what I like about this is it really allows me a really good coverage as my base layer for encaustic medium, which is the start of any good encaustic painting. And this really will hold the heat too, to allow me to really good cover the entire panel. And the goat hair also insulates to keep the warmth from the paint. Here I have my encaustic medium all melted here, and I'm going to begin by placing the new brush into the heat and getting that really saturated. And this is where I'm going to apply this semi-clear layer to my encaustic board. And it's recommended to apply this in 2 layers. And then I'm going to fuse it, which is the term for adding heat. And this board is absorbent, so it's going to allow that encaustic medium to sink into the board and become a nice layer for my painting. So I'm going to cover the entire board once, and then I am going to fuse. Fusing entails using a heat gun like this, and there's a low and a high setting. So the high setting allows me to melt the wax flat for a very smooth surface, and when I want to create texture, I'm going to use it on the low setting. So this is an R&S Handmade Paints heat gun, and you can use different kinds of heat guns such as irons, torches, or any other heating element that gets to at least 200 degrees. Now that I have this nice and smooth, I'm going to apply one more layer using the Hake style brush for 2 layers of encaustic medium. The heated griddle I'm using is off camera here, and basically it's an electric tabletop griddle that allows me to set the temperature at 200 degrees. And you can see I've got my encaustic medium here, and I also have some tins of color. Now that I have a really nice smooth surface of 2 layers of encaustic medium, I'm ready to begin my painting. And I'm going to do that by adding some color, which with 2 brushes. I'm going to be using the Silverstone Grand Prix round number 6 and the Grand Prix Silverstone number 4. This is an extra long filbert. And I also like these brushes because they're longer, the filaments are longer, and that also allows the wax to stay heated longer. So I've got my tissue paper image here, and I kind of use it as a guide to help me know where to place little paint. And I can use these as an underlayer, so I'm going to use the round first to add a little blue in my sky, and I've got some turquoise encaustic paint here, Indian yellow, which is a very nice kind of warm yellow transparent color, and then I've got brilliant extra pale yellow. So this is a little bit more opaque, and I just want to add in maybe some clouds in the sky. So I'm going to take some encaustic paint here and heat it on the griddle, kind of get some of this color. And this is my favorite part about working with wax, is it's just so lovely to melt some paint on your heated griddle. And this is a little bit more of an opaque white here. And then I can add encaustic medium to any of these colors to extend the color, make them a little more transparent. So if they are an opaque color, you can extend the color. And I'm going to choose to do that just so they're a little bit thinner color. So let's start with the Grand Prix filbert, and I'm just going to kind of work this into the color and then start painting this on. Yeah, I'll hold up the panel so you can see that detailing a little more. So you'll notice that as I'm painting, the paint starts to cool right here. So initially it's very warm and has a good coverage area, and that is just the characteristic of the paint. So working with natural bristles is very important because the heat is not kind to synthetic bristles. And that's why I love working with the Grand Prix for working with wax. And the wax just creates such beautiful textures, unlike any other paint, and that's really what I love about it. And investing in really good quality brushes for your paintings are a thing that I found over time too, that it just really pays to have good quality brushes no matter the medium you work with. The next brush I'm going to use is the Silverstone Grand Prix Round, and I'm going to go into this yellow. And what I'm kind of going for is kind of a sky look behind the tissue, and then maybe there's a slight horizon of a sunrise coming through. I'm just kind of painting this on. And I will need to fuse this layer, so you do have to fuse every layer of paint that you add to a painting. So I'm going to do that now. Here we are, all fused, and it's important to fuse each layer to the previous layer so that when you're done with your painting, you're going to have one layer. If there's paint that gets into an area that you would like to remove it, these palette knives work really wonderful, and I've got the number 6 here. So I am going to go ahead and just kind of remove this paint. And that's what's really unique about encaustic paint, is that it's a very additive and a very subtractive process. So I can apply the paint and then I can kind of work it off and create a little bit more of a cloudy sky versus a streaky sky. And I'm just using the knife edge of this palette knife right here, kind of just using that to just lift off, almost like frosting, taking off some of this wax. And I like that a little bit better. It's much more soft, and I can even reapply the wax that I've just taken off. And I am getting quite a bit of texture with this technique, so I'm going to fuse it one more time just to get it back to smooth. Once I get this base layer the way I'd like, I can then move on to combining my tissue as collage. And you can kind of get a little hint of how that's already starting to look like a little bit of a sunrise there. And I'm going to add one more layer of encaustic medium just to encapsulate the color. And that way when I heat up the tissue, it's not going to come through the tissue. So fusing is important for 2 reasons. It really binds the paint together with heat, and it also allows me to smooth it. So it's kind of a twofold process. And right now I do want it smooth, so I'm going to put that tissue on it. Here I am putting that barrier layer over the color, almost like I'm sandwiching that color in. And it really does create a very soft color, unlike any other kind of paint, which is what I love about it so much. And when I'm working with the Hake style brush, you can see that I really get a lot longer paint coverage just because it is goat hair and that is conducting the heat. So I'm going to cover this one more time, use it, and then we are ready to embed our tissue paper. Here is the tissue picture that I took of some leaves in the springtime here. I love seeing the shape of the trees, and so oftentimes I will go out and take photographs just for that reason, and I can kind of create the scene behind the image. If it was a cloudy day, I can make it a sunny day, or if it was a fall day, I can make it a spring day. So I do that with the colors that I choose with the paint. To embed the tissue, I'm going to begin using a layer of encaustic medium coming out from the center out to the edges. And what's exciting is it just reveals the color that I've just put underneath. And I go into a flower pattern so that I can kind of push the air bubbles out to the edges. And that also allows me to make sure I apply just one layer of wax. So here's what we have so far, and it's already starting to come together. So back to our palette knife, this is what I'm going to use to press the wax and the tissue paper while I'm heating it into the bottom layer of wax. And then this tissue paper layer that I just added as collage is going to become one layer of the painting. Now that I've got it all fused, I want to add some transparent blue into the sky. So I'm going to use the Silverstone number 4 brush, Bright. And what I like about this is it's got a flat area in the detail, and this is one of the nice small brushes that I like to use to add in around the branches. So I'm going to add some paint off camera here. Let's do that, some turquoise, and then I can add a little bit of the encaustic medium just to thin that color. So let's do that and add some. So I just kind of am warming up the brush here so it starts to accept that paint. And I can start to add a little bit of detail into the sky. And I've got an area that's very opaque, and then I've got off the sides, I've got some transparent blue mixed a lot with the encaustic medium. And then let's add some details into and around the branches. And one thing I love about wax is the transparency, because you can use that medium to thin a color. And I'm just going to add a little bit more detail, just kind of bringing in a little bit of that sky down to the sunrise. With it being an additive and subtractive practice, I feel like I've got a little bit more blue deposit here that I want. So I can come in again. I heated up my palette knife on the griddle. And then I can just start to use that knife edge to scrape some of this color back. So again, it is very easy to edit. It's very addable. You can add paint and scrape away paint at any given time. And it's not necessarily a mistake, but it just allows you to almost carve the surface and create a nice texture. And I do want to add some texture in the sky. So I'm going to use the Silverstone Bright number 10. It's about 1 inch wide, which I really like. And the wider the brush, the easier it is to build up some texture. So I've got some color here, that light yellow pale. And this is a pretty opaque white, so I want to add some medium to thin that down. And it's got a slight yellow tinge to it, so it's a chromatic white, which I think will look nice versus kind of a hard, harsh white. And if I'm not sure of the color, sometimes I'll tap it on the side just to see what that is. And I think I want to add just a little bit more transparency. So a key to adding texture is to let the brush cool off in this case. And I want to just add a little texture in the cloud area. So I'm going to let this brush cool off, and then I'm going to hold it parallel to the painting and just start to let that color build up. And it naturally wants to cool off as I'm painting, and you can see how I'm starting to get some texture right there. So recharge the heat, let it cool for a few moments, and then go ahead and start to brush again. And this is a really great set that I'm working with if you are starting with Encaustic, or even if you want to try different natural bristle brushes with Silverstone or Silverbrush. And again, there will be a discount code at the end of this video for all of the brushes and the palette knife that I'm using. So I just want to let you see here how that texture starts to build up. That's one of the beautiful things that I love about wax too. There's so many things, of course, but that is another one. And then I will fuse this lightly to keep that texture. I don't want to melt it flat. The key to fusing is really just getting a little bit of a sheen when it starts to melt, and then you know that is fused enough. So I can keep building this up, and there's really no limit to how many layers I can use. Again, letting this cool off and just letting that texture really build up. So right now I've got about 3 or 4 layers. And I like what I'm getting here, but I do want to scrape this back slightly. I like the texture that I'm getting here, but it's a little more smooth. So again, I'm going to take my palette knife, just that knife edge, and just kind of knock down the initial textured areas so that I can make them a little more consistent. So there you can see how I just kind of just flatten those out a little bit more, but then I'm going to start to build it up again. And taking this brush, just kind of letting that build up. I'm going to keep working on this painting, but I just want to show you what it's looking like right now. And a couple of things I just want to remind you of is when you're fusing, to really just get a little bit of a sheen to the wax. That means it's melted, and it's not going to melt more by adding more heat. Usually what that means is you'll kind of lose your detail, especially if you're looking to have more of a textured area. But if you want it to be more smooth, like the lower part of this painting, then you want to fuse on the high setting. And again, when that gets that sheen of meltedness, then you know it's fused. So I find that's one common mistake working with wax is overfusing or not kind of knowing how much to fuse. But when you kind of just take a look at using the lighting in the room to kind of check out the sheen, usually that will give you a good clue. If it's shiny, then you can stop and you are finished fusing. So you can get started right away with wax. You just need some paint, a heated griddle, a heat gun, and some of Silverbrush's brushes to get you started. And again, there is a discount code at the end of this. In the meantime, if you would like to take workshops with me, I do teach around the country, also in my studio in Minneapolis. And I'm going to be teaching in Ireland next year and San Miguel, Mexico. So I've got that on my website, which is jodireeb.com, JODI-Reeb.com. And I also have some videos on YouTube if you want to check those out and just see if encaustic painting is for you. And I love it so much because it does give you so much versatility. And I work a lot with photographs, but honestly you wouldn't have to. You can just use it as regular paint, and you can just get beautiful paintings using texture and transparency. So let's stay in touch. You can follow me on Instagram or Facebook, just my name, and I usually will post different workshop listings there, as well as my artwork. So I hope you check me out, and I hope we stay in touch. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found this helpful, and happy painting.